Mary stumbled home well after 2 a.m. on Saturday. Her Friday evening began soon after work, when she and a few pals decided to kick off the weekend at their favorite bar. They drank copious amounts of alcohol and danced the night away until Mary became overwhelmed. Thankful she hadn't driven. She knew Darren would be her chosen driver again, subjecting her to his lectures all the way home. Being out late had become a regular occurrence for her in the previous year or so, as she made her way down the dark hallway, hardly able to put one foot in front of the other. Mary considered her husband's possible sleeping state. It would not be beyond her to make enough noise to awaken him from his slumber. In fact, she liked the notion, a drunken smirk remaining on her face. She recognized her increasing bitterness. Ascending the stairs, she ignored the guest room and continued her wobbly journey. By the time she reached the master bedroom, she was relying on the wall for support and forcing the door open with her foot. She was astonished to see the bedroom lamp lit, and even more surprised to find the bed vacant. Where in the hell is he? Her thoughts commanded, and her legs moved instinctively towards the restroom. After a thorough search of the upstairs, there was no sign of him. She descended the steps, her heart racing. A faint glimmer came from the kitchen, causing her to suppose he had slept off at the table while waiting for her. No such luck awaited her. Instead, she discovered that the hood light above the stove had been left on, which added to her frustration. She murmured angrily as she inspected the debris on the counter. She considered postponing it until the morning, but a glimpse of something sparkling caught her eye, drawing a high-top chair closer. She fell into it and inspected the trinket she had picked up. Darren's wedding band. The weight of it in her hand only exacerbated her rising anxiety. There was a mess of documents beneath it. Her passport. One appeared to be a ticket, the other a sealed packet. She glanced at her watch, which read 30, and considered waiting for Darren to return and explain. With a heavy sigh, she laid her head on her folded arms and was asleep within moments. The mystery of Darren's absence still hangs over her. Mary couldn't remember how she ended up on the floor, but the impact startled her awake despite her intoxication. Rubbing her cheeks groggily, she looked at her wristwatch. 5:45. Anger welled up within her as she realized Darren had went home and left her sleeping on the counter. Determined to face him, she stormed up the stairs, only to find the bedroom vacant upon arrival. This time, she moved purposefully. As she threw open the garage door after quickly descending the steps and turning on the overhead light in the kitchen, which filled the space with light, uncertainty mixed with frustration. Only to discover that Darren's car was still missing, she returned her sight to the counter, where the pile of products remained unmoved. Examining her passport, she noticed the outdated photo and realized she hadn't used it in years. The flight ticket to Florida puzzled her even more, and her interest aroused as she tore open the envelope containing her name. She's racing to get her reading glasses from the nightstand. She returned to the kitchen, clutching the letter in her hand, and took a seat at the counter to solve the enigma before her. Dear Mary, if you're reading this, you've surely realized that I'm not at home and have found everything I left for you. You've undoubtedly heard it at a bar, especially in the last few years. Dell announced the last call approximately 30 minutes before closing time. So, my dear wife, consider this your final call. I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that our marriage hasn't been functioning for quite some time. I wish I could say I'm content to let things hobble along like it has for the previous few years, but it is not in the cards. As I see it, we have two choices. Option 1, summon the fortitude to acquire those documents and join me for a difficult week of attempting to salvage what's left of our relationship. If you choose this course, I will be there for you when you arrive, and we can take it from there. Option 2 is not as appealing. We split ways in order to find everything evenly and put an end to what has unfortunately become a hallmark of marriage. I can't say I wouldn't prefer option 2, but there's still some sort of sensation remaining, if not much, so I'm ready to give it one more try. I'm not going to go into detail about how we got here or who's to blame. I'll just state that I cannot continue on the road you've set for us. Mary paused in her reading, looking around the room in surprise. Surely this had to be a prank. Darren lacked the confidence to carry out what he had written. She anticipated him to stroll through the door soon, humbly requesting pardon, like he always did. Mary reflected sadly on the gratitude she had earned for being gentle with him. If he believes he can scare me with the fear of divorce, he is very misguided. Despite her displeasure, she resolved to continue reading his ridiculous letter, thinking that she had already put so much time in it. Mary and I have experienced many good moments in the past and raised two amazing children together. However, as the phrase goes, being in a difficult marriage just for the sake of the children is unsustainable. Our children are now grown and on their own paths with the individuals they have chosen. I feel that if we're both prepared to make some concessions, we can recapture the love and connection we felt when we first met. It will not be easy, but it is necessary if we want our marriage to last. Damn that. Damn it, she mumbled and flung the letter onto the counter. I gave him everything I had, and now he has the audacity to claim it wasn't enough. I promise on my life that he will pay for this. When he walked through that door, Mary asked the empty room if he had any backbone, rather than be a cowardly coward. Maybe I wouldn't have to keep pushing him. If it were not for me, he'd still be a low-level rope salesperson instead of climbing the corporate ladder as he has. He should be groveling at my feet rather than issuing ultimatums. Who does he think he is, and who is he speaking to? Damn his mother. Mary's irritation increased, as it often did when Darren failed to meet her expectations with a huff. She went back to reading the letter. As previously stated, Mary, I will meet you at the plane, ready to begin the path of rebuilding our lives together. However, you must confirm that you are aboard the plane. Mary looked at the ticket in amazement. There is no chance I will be able to catch that flight. It leaves in about 3 hours, she exclaimed while checking her watch. Mr. High and Mighty will be in for a surprise when I am not on that plane, she murmured while spinning his wedding band on the counter. And he won't get this ring back easily. He'll need to earn it. She smirked, picturing the jobs she'd assign him as the rings dropped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. She simply left it there, exhausted after a night of partying with her pals. All she wanted was sleep. Dealing with her husband could wait till she was ready. Mary ignored the letter since she was unaware of the implications indicated in it. If she had, she would have noticed a chain of events that had already begun just a few hours later that morning while nursing a cup of coffee at the kitchen table and swearing off booze. Mary was astonished to see Darren's two brothers, Frank and James, arrive via the front entrance. Excuse me, but you two cannot just rush into my house, even if you are Darren's brothers. Mary snapped, looking at Frank and James as they entered. Take your time drinking your coffee. We're only come to collect a few items. My brother asked us to grab. Frank responded. He cast a scornful gaze at his sister-in-law. Fine. Go ahead and tell him he's in for a world of trouble when he returns, Mary responded harshly. They didn't answer, instead dash upstairs with a carton of black trash bags. 3 fast trips later, they were gone. He did not say anything else to Mary. They may have said thank you. Mary grumbled to herself, finishing her second cup of coffee and deciding whether to eat breakfast or lunch. Glancing up at the clock after a late lunch, she went shopping with her friends, and because Darren was not present, they ended up having a night out. But she never got home. She awakened on Kelly's couch on Sunday afternoon, hoping for relief from her pounding headache for the second time in 2 days. She vowed to abstain from drinking, knowing full well that it would only last till she recovered. Darren is probably at home right now, wondering where the hell I am. Let him stew in his own worries, she reasoned, before falling back asleep, despite her initial nasty aim. Mary recognized she couldn't stay at Kelly's on Sunday night. The looming Monday a.m. work schedule plus a lack of spare clothing at her friend's house forced her to come home. Mary's rage flared up as she walked into the still empty house. He can attempt to avoid me all he wants, but he can't get away forever, she murmured to herself, already planning her next moves for when she finally confronted Darren. The night passed calmly, too quietly for Mary's liking, as she lay in bed reading. Her thoughts suddenly drifted towards Darren, however not in a hostile manner for once. Maybe I'll give him some leeway when he returns. It's been a long and I know he enjoys pleasing me, she thought. She felt a stirring deep within herself. Not love, per se, but a feeling similar to the fulfillment she had after Darren had brought her to a climax. She awoke late Monday morning. Her book, which remained on her lap Monday morning, was disorganized without Darren's normal prodding. Mary arrived at work 30 minutes late. Mary was not aware of Darren's disappearance until Kelly inquired about his tardiness. At 10:54, Mary was approached by a man in a suit who handed her an envelope without speaking. "Mrs. Mary Gray, you have been served," he stated simply before turning on his heel and leaving the premises. "He has crossed a line. Internal communications may be received. That little guy will pay dearly for embarrassing me like this," she raged, examining her surroundings to see who had observed the interaction. Kelly and Mary read the envelope's contents during lunch. "He isn't asking for much," Kelly remarked while flipping through the 5-page pamphlet. 50% of the savings, his 401. You get to keep the house. He seemed to want nothing more than to leave. "He's not getting anything," Mary exclaimed venomously, unleashing the bitterness normally held for Darren. "By the time I'm done with him, he'll regret ever crossing me." During lunch, Mary checked their online bank accounts and was surprised to see that 50% of their funds had been removed. When she contacted the bank, they informed her that Darren had made the withdrawal and that there were no further accounts in his name. Mary knew he had taken the money and started a new account somewhere. On her way home from work, Mary went to another bank and created a new account in her name. Only 2 people can play this game. She had a thought. When Mary arrived at her vacant house, she poured herself a large glass of wine and went to the kitchen. She retrieved Darren's letter as well as the other stuff placed on the counter. 2 days ago, she reread the letter from where she had left off with newfound interest. "Mary, if you choose not to board that flight, I will accept that as an answer, and the following steps will be initiated. I've already removed everything I wanted from the house, leaving only the rest of my clothes. My brothers will arrive on Saturday to retrieve whatever remains. On Monday, you will be served with the divorce papers that I prepared months ago. As previously said, this is your final opportunity, and if you don't join me by Saturday, it's the end. I will try to be fair, but if you chose to contest it, things might become ugly, and I am sure neither of us want that. Our children have known for quite some time that our marriage was merely in name, so they should not be surprised. Our relatives are undoubtedly amazed that we have survived this long. That is all I have to say till we meet, whether in person or not. If not, I sincerely wish you a good life. Despite everything, I have no ill will towards you. My aim is that you find what makes you happy. Your spouse, Darren." Mary's first reaction to the airline ticket and associated paperwork was a resounding shit. On Sunday morning, hundreds of miles away, Darren lounged in a recliner, immersed in the new device he had purchased the week before. "I apologize," Peggy murmured, staring at Darren. "Do not be. It is mostly my fault. If I hadn't given in to her throughout the years and stood my ground, perhaps we wouldn't be in this predicament today. Then again, who knows? At this point, I don't really care. I am just grateful that is finally over." Darren responded. "Did you really expect her to show up when he was scrolling through the iPad menu looking for the books he had downloaded earlier?" Peggy inquired. "No, but I promised my kids I'd give it one more attempt." Darren stated that his attention was still riveted on the television. "You're just glad we won't need both cabins anymore. If you choose, we can switch cabins every night. That way, we'll always have a clean bed to mess up," Peggy teased, pulling Darren close and kissing him. Peggy, tinged with emotion, had worked with Darren for the past decade, seeing his slow fall in marital bliss. Her own husband had died 8 years before, and Darren had been a source of consolation for her during times of frustration. He had been a helpful friend, assuring her that things would improve with time and lending an ear anytime she wanted to vent. He had been her confidant and sounding board. However, Darren was not always gentle and accommodating. He had to remind her of reality on occasion. "Your husband may have died, but you are still alive. Randy would not have wanted you to give up on life. Do you grieve for him? Yes, but then move onward. You're young and handsome, with a lot to give. Any man would be fortunate to have you," he told her once. It seems like a lifetime ago. The card she sent him 3 years ago included simply 2 words: "Thank you." It remained unsigned on his desk. However, Darren knew exactly who it was from. 2 years ago, their roles were reversed. Peggy began listening to Darren's problems and providing her advice when prompted. There was never anything physical between them, but Peggy knew she would have jumped at the opportunity. They developed tight friendships and became increasingly reliant on one another. Darren arrived at work on a Monday 9 months ago, enraged. It was all about Mary, her complaints and ingratitude, and he was over her. Still, Peggy stood by to offer counsel, but Mary's behavior went too far. It had gotten so severe that Peggy was prepared to take drastic measures to alleviate Darren's agony. Then, out of nowhere, Darren made an unexpected offer, a 1-week paid vacation aboard Carnival Glory. But there was a catch. They would have separate cabins. Peggy was puzzled. This cruise is my final attempt to save what's left of my marriage. However, it is nearly guaranteed that Mary will let it slide through her fingers like everything else. Darren confessed to Peggy. Even if she decides to join me, I want you to be in the other cabin on the ship to help me accept that it is done. Peggy grinned, indicating her willingness to follow him, and they made their plans together at Southwest Airlines gate number 26. They waited together until the captain and crew disembarked. Darren felt a sense of relief without thinking twice. He grabbed a stunned Peggy and kissed her softly at first, then with a passion he'd been harboring for years. I've wanted to do it for years. He admitted snatching another kiss before announcing that they had a boat to catch. After checking into their various accommodations, they sat on deck, marveling at the gifts of the following 7 magnificent days. Darren switched Peggy's dinner table reservation, and they chose not to plan any excursions. Perhaps on our next cruise? Peggy offered, smiling. They spent the day exploring the ship, having a delicious supper and dancing the night away in the clubs. As it approached 1 meter, they grudgingly discussed the first night's sleeping arrangements. They slept separately in their individual cabins. Darren said to Peggy during breakfast, "This is the last time I'll ever sleep alone." He put a promise ring onto her finger. He promised to take it one day at a time until the divorce was final. Peggy felt as if she were walking on air with her head in clouds. They ultimately spent the night together on Sunday. It surpassed all of Darren's expectations. On the cruise's final day, he felt genuinely pleased again. Peggy recommended they hide in their cabin and revisit the memories they'd shared. Darren adored the concept, but reality beckoned. 2 people are anticipated to return to work on Monday, and I doubt our supervisors will understand, he reasoned. Peggy pondered asking anyhow, but Darren proposed another option. "Why don't you allow me to move in with you?" she proposed. Although tempted, Darren chose to resign, at least for the time being, with his brother Frank while the divorce proceedings were underway. Despite Mary's volley of insults and threats, Darren remained unconcerned, wearing his bliss like armor. The divorce was approved, and the 90-day waiting period until it became official began. Their children grew tired of their mother's continuous rants, implying that if she had treated Darren like a loving husband rather than a doormat, they could still be married. Mary responded by cutting off touch with both of them for a month. With only 10 days until their divorce was official, Mary saw the engagement announcement in the newspaper and immediately sent a caustic email to Darren. The day after his divorce was finalized, Darren and Peggy renewed vows in an intimate ceremony attended by a select few, including his children, parents, Peggy's sister, and her parents. Darren found himself becoming happy with each passing day. A month later, Mary was sitting alone in the bar with the remnants of her pals. Around 1:30 a.m., the bartender rang the bell to signal last call. If only Mary murmured to herself. Her voice sounded sorrowful. Here is the next story. It was a hectic trip, a 2-day journey home with just stops for gas, the restroom, and fast food after what was intended to be 2 weeks of renewal. It was becoming late. When we went home, there was very little edible food in the house. I got up early for work, stopped by the neighborhood donut store to have a few of my favorites, and grabbed a coffee along the way. My early return astonished everyone in the office. I didn't have time for a complete lunch, so I ate cheese crackers and drank a drink at my desk. I met with the boss and had my ass kicked for someone else's mistake. I arrive home just in time to witness my wife, Lori, driving down the street in a rented vehicle. Her destination is unknown to me. I took a protein bar from the refrigerator we had brought with us on our ill-fated journey. When we departed, the food we had put in it remained unused. The ice and ice packs had melted, leaving everything toasty. The protein bar was saturated in water from the melted ice and was therefore unfit for consumption. Almost everything she owned before to the wedding was gone from the living room. I stepped inside the bedroom. The dresser was gone, as was her childhood dresser. None of her belongings were present, and the closet was empty. On the kitchen island stood 3 dirty coffee mugs. Her family's china and crystal were missing. Nothing came as a surprise. The objective of the trip was to attempt to resolve a few concerns in our 2-year marriage. Honestly, we only had one major one, but it was the most significant. To cheat or not to cheat? That was the question. I voted in favor of not cheating. One of the songs the DJ played at our reception was about a furious wedding, which accurately represented us. We'd barely known each other for 6 months prior to the wedding. Can you imagine how many people told both of us that marrying so young was a horrible mistake? Short answer. Almost everyone I knew or was associated with. The same held true for her. But we didn't listen since we were in love and knew more than everyone else combined. God, we were stupid. The sickness referenced in the reception hymn subsided shortly after the priest called us husband and wife. The wedding cake remains had not yet gone stale when the issue began. It all began with her new boss's son, a collegiate soccer player trained to feel he was entitled to anything he desired. His father purchased the car dealership where my wife works. Our town has 6 auto dealerships, and after Martin Justin Jr. purchased the one Lori worked at, he now owns 3. Lori worked there for 4 years and was helpful in securing my cousin Jeffrey a job at the car business. Everyone who knew Jeff loved and trusted him. He wasn't the smartest or fastest guy in the world, but he enjoyed and excelled at cleaning vehicles. He's also a great technician, but he's never had the courage to execute it on a consistent basis. He was one of my best men at my wedding, and in addition to being my cousin, I considered him a close friend. Justin's son did not come in right away after purchasing the dealership because he was attending school, but once the summer was over, he began dropping by the office where the majority of the employees were women. It became his favorite hanging spot. Lori's desk quickly became the focus of his existence while at the dealership. Lori found him annoying at first. Then she didn't mention anything about him, so I assumed he had either stopped or gone on to someone else to irritate. Jeff was more quiet than normal. One evening, he and I sat on the porch of Lori's leased home. He liked beer, but had a very poor tolerance for alcohol, so I always kept a beer close for him if he recognized the difference. He never said anything. Do not misunderstand. He's not dumb. He just doesn't understand things very quickly. But once he learns anything, he never forgets it. And he's extremely loyal to his buddies, particularly me. So we sat on the porch. He didn't say anything and barely touched his drink. He often stared at me. So, Jeff, what's wrong? Roger likes Lori. Roger was Justin's son. I chuckled. Everyone likes Lori. Lori likes Roger. No, he does not. Tim, I am not that slow. He spends a lot of time talking with her. Today, he left for lunch at the same time as she did, and they returned at the same time. Lori never went out for lunch. She would always eat in the break room and watch TV game shows. Are you certain? He nodded slowly. It was the first indication that there was problems in paradise. We didn't discuss it again that night. When she got home, I asked her whether things was going okay at work and if she had any issues. It is all right. Why are you asking? No reason. Roger was once a pest, and you haven't thought about him in a long time. He's still a nuisance, but I can handle him. The second, third, and fourth signs appeared swiftly, all from Jeff. Inappropriate touches, such as his hand on her ass or her hand on his leg while they were sitting close together. Things like that. However, nothing directly indicated infidelity. I didn't like what I heard, but I didn't tell Lori. I simply asked Jeff to keep an eye on them and let me know what he saw. On the instances when he noticed something incorrect, he'd call me. I was typically quite assertive and belligerent, but here I was taking it easy for a variety of reasons. First, I did not want to think about her doing something wrong, such as cheating, but I also didn't want to hear all the "I told you so's" if she did cheat. One afternoon, he called to report that Lori and Jeff were kissing in Jeff's father's office. The kiss seemed out of place. I spoke with her about it that evening. She denied it at first, but then revealed that she and Roger had messed about and kissed briefly, but nothing serious. Is anything serious about to happen? I asked. Of course not, she responded. I made it abundantly plain that I would not allow any more playing or kissing, and that adultery would undoubtedly lead to divorce. We can divorce as soon as we get married, and I will not delay divorce if you ever sleep with someone else. I never told her how I learned about her. And Roger. Jeff was dismissed the following day. It wasn't difficult to guess. Lori and I never talked about his firing, but I did comment on how foolish it was to fire someone with a disability. I also explained that Jeff and I planned to file a complaint against Justin with the ADA organization. Nobody ever thought Jeff was crippled, just slow, and the suggestion of filing a complaint was simply my excuse. He and I never addressed this. The next day, Jeff was rehired at one of Martin Justin Jr.'s 2 other dealerships. However, the employees where he had previously worked complained so strongly that he was reinstated to his prior post. It was a fascinating study in human relationships. Almost every employee at the dealership stood up for Jeff. Lori and I have discussed how married people should behave several times since our talk and my comment that divorce may be acquired fast. The first and most crucial of these practices is to never put yourself in situations that your spouse would not approve of. For example, while dining alone with a member of the opposite sex who is not a family member may be completely innocent, his or her appearance can spark gossip, especially in a small town. Once rumors start spreading, they can't be stopped, and a good reputation can swiftly be lost. Following that chat, we reflected and decided to take a trip to attempt to recover some of the enchantment, some of the fever referenced in the song at our reception. We planned the trip, took some time off, packed our belongings, and hit the road. We took 2 full days to get on the road. The first few hours of the drive were nice enough, but we hadn't been on the road for long when our phone rang. She stared at it but did not respond. She did, however, turn off the ringer. Less than an hour later, she received another call. She clutched the phone in her palm and felt the vibration. She jumped up anxiously. She stared but did not respond. After a few minutes, I asked if we might stop to use the restroom. We pulled at a big truck stop. I pulled up to the pump and she jumped out and went inside. I normally dislike irresponsible drivers who fill up their tanks and then leave the car parked at the pump while they go to the store or use the service. This typically means that other drivers must wait for them to fill up. Things move much more smoothly if you park your car after refueling and then enter. But these are just my complaints. I was the most reckless person at the moment, so as she ran inside, I followed her. She never looked back, and as soon as she stepped out the door, she was on the phone. I said I'd call you when I got a chance. There was a pause. Damn it, Roger, I am serious. I will call you when I come back. Another pause. Roger, don't. She looked at her phone before looking around. I hid beneath a large shelf of snacks and waited a few seconds before peering up to see whether she was present. I heard her comments as she stood with her back to me. You son of a bitch, do not hang up on me again. Apparently, the son of a bitch did hung up since she looked at her clearly dead phone again. That time, she did not look around. She just tried calling him, but he did not respond. She was gazing at her phone when I approached and stood in front of her. Is everything okay? I asked. Yeah, it's fine. She stared at me. I need to go to the bathroom, she muttered, hurried away. I returned to the car and refilled the tank. She emerged with a Coke. I gazed at her. That is okay. I will get I said, stepping inside. She gazed at me, as if she didn't understand it would have been polite to ask if I wanted anything from the store. As I was exiting the soda shop, I glanced over. She was on the phone again. She ended the chat just as I opened the door to get into the car. I did not say anything, started the car, and drove away. That night, we stayed in a motel. We had pizza delivered to our room and went to bed before 10 p.m. We spent the majority of the next day driving, not conversing at all. We checked into the hotel, ate dinner in the dining area, and then went to bed. I was still awake, peering into the darkness, when I noticed her phone buzz after 11. There's no noise, only light. She sprang up and dashed to the restroom with it. I gently stood behind the closed restroom door, attempting to hear but failing to do so. Please do not, were the only 2 words I comprehended. The chat lasted a few minutes as I stood there trying to figure out what she was saying. But I just couldn't. I was still standing there when she opened the door. She shrieked. I had terrified her. What? What exactly are you doing there? she inquired when she realized who it was. I was just curious what you were doing in there. I gestured towards the restroom. Nothing. I went to the bathroom. You needed a phone for that. Yeah, I used the light to get here so I didn't cause any damage. She attempted to walk around me. You neglected to flush. Yes, she came back, blushing. Who were you speaking to? What? Who were you speaking to? Not anyone. Why? She was lying, and I knew it. She was aware. I already knew. I'm going to bed in the morning. Tell me who you spoke with and what you discussed, or we're going home. We took this trip to attempt to straighten things out, but it requires both of us. If that's our plan, keeping secrets doesn't look good. I went to bed and eventually fell asleep just before daybreak. She was seated on the couch in the room when I woke up, maybe an hour after falling asleep. I raised myself, placed a couple of cushions beneath me, and gazed at her. She stared at me again. That was Roger's name? What exactly was that about? He wants to sleep with me. I paused for a moment before answering again. I inquired. She hesitated before nodding. I took a chance. I had no reason to suspect they'd slept together. Her admission took me by surprise. How many times have you slept with him thus far? 2? Why? I'm not certain. The first was a sense of curiosity, I believe. And the other one? He threatened if I did not inform you, he would threaten me again. Yes. I knew just how I would react. I had never let her know that cheating was acceptable. More than that, I had openly said what would happen if she did, and I anticipated nothing less from her if I cheated. You understand that it will end our marriage, don't you? Her eyes welled up with tears, and she nodded once more. I got up and went to the bathroom. After rinsing off the water and cleaning my hands, I brushed my teeth, washed my face, reinserted the toothbrush and toothpaste into the shaving kit, and opened the door. I'm on the way home. You can either join me or wait for him to pick you up. It simply took a few minutes to pack and depart the room. I looked into our situation. We hopped into the car and started the lengthy drive, stopping only for petrol, restrooms, and fast food. This was mentioned earlier. The trip should have offered her an opportunity to apologize, beg for forgiveness, or a second chance. However, she accomplished none of these things. Furthermore, we didn't speak the entire time. When we came to a halt, she bought her own food and I bought mine. She never indicated that she needed to use the restroom. When we came to a stop, she was always the first to arrive. Get back in the car. My first day of work had ended when I got home. Lori's belongings had been removed from the house, and I had not eaten anything delicious in days. We'd never used the town's only meal delivery service, but I figured now was a good moment to start. I visited their website, created an account, and placed an order for food. 40 minutes later, the delivery service rang my doorbell. I picked up my lunch and tipped the driver in addition to what I had put to the bill. When I ordered the food and anticipated savoring it with a glass or 2 or 6 of wine, I placed it on the tray by the television and sat down to eat. Through the glass, I could see the TV as well as the street. While I was dining, a car was parked outside with someone sitting behind the wheel. My focus turned away from the television and onto the car in which the driver was sitting. I was halfway through my meal and the driver had not moved. I took a sip of wine and went out. The driver saw me and rolled down his window. It was my meal delivery driver and she was crying. Are you all right? I inquired. No, my car won't start and I can't phone for help. I hadn't noticed her or her automobile when she originally came because I was preoccupied with other things. Everyone I know is tied up or unresponsive, and my brother won't be able to arrive for another hour. Another thing I failed to notice was the baby in the rear seat. She was seated with a book on her lap, looking like she wanted to cry too. Do you want me to look at her? God, please complete it. She opened her door and crept inside. I went behind the wheel and flicked the ignition key. Click, click, click. And then nothing. I tried again. There was no click this time. Simply nothing. I'm not a mechanic, but I believe I understand when the battery is low. I brought my car and attempted to start it, but was unable. It was suddenly beyond my strength. Look, why don't you two go inside? I will have my cousin come in and look at it. They grudgingly accompanied me inside. Make yourself comfy while I summon him. Jeff arrived in 15 minutes, and her automobile was ready in 30. She thanked me, chatted to Jeff, hugged him, and went. The following 2 days at work were terrible. I hadn't informed anyone about Lori, and my boss was on my ass like white on rice, which I was getting tired of. My personal life was in disarray, and he anticipated to receive a silk purse from a saucier for a moderately lucrative endeavor. I felt it was time for a meeting with him. I'm tired of being pestered by you. The initiative was a failure from the beginning, as I had already stated. I despise ultimatums, but you can either keep out of my ass and let me see what I can do with it, or give it to someone else, or simply kiss my ass and I'll walk out. Choose your preferred option. I'm returning home. When you've made your decision, please call me. I was confident he'd let me cool off for a few days before calling me back to work. Aside from that, I needed to find a lawyer and initiate divorce processes. I called Jeff in the evening and asked if he wanted a drink, even though I prefer wine or beer when I drink with him, and almost beer for him, but I cannot. I have a date. He dated me when we were in high school and again in college. He would frequently phone me and tell me about his rare dates, asking for guidance if he was lucky. I had never heard of it, but he wasn't the type of guy to brag about it, even to me. Aside from being sluggish, he was extremely bashful, and strangers made him nervous. So excellent for you. Who's the lucky girl? Jenny. Jenny? Who? Feeding the girl. What type of cuisine is this? The one standing outside your house with the broken car. Are you really serious? Yes. So, Mr. Smooth Talker, how did it happen? When I was working on her automobile, I informed her that if she needed any further assistance, she could call me, so she did it. And you assisted her again? He laughed like a child. Yeah. So where are you going to take her? Nowhere. There isn't any room. No, I'm heading to her house. She is fixing dinner for me. I left pleased for him. But I couldn't turn down the opportunity to tease him. You are aware that she is a vegetarian, correct? What's that? This is someone who exclusively eats plants. There are no meats, eggs, or dairy items. Jeff was a straightforward individual. There are a few restaurants that promote that if you have a large steak, which is more of a roast with salad, vegetables, and dessert, it's free. One of them is close to us. Jeff did just that. He was sick for 2 days, but he completed it. There's no flesh, not even a hamburger. What am I going to eat? Well, there will be a lot of lettuce and possibly some beans. If we're lucky, we might get some quinoa. Queen? Who? Not the queen. Quinoa. It is a seed that can be utilized in a variety of vegetarian recipes. It was fed to animals for many years in the Lake Titicaca region of South America before people began consuming it. What? I'm not hungry anymore. I laughed right into the tube. I'm kidding, Jeff. I have no idea what she is eating, but whatever it is, I am certain it will be great. Go have some fun. I decided to call the food delivery service again so that I could eat dinner by myself. I spent the next day doing housework. Lori was gone and I still had more than a year on my lease, so I decided to make it as pleasant as possible. I also expected my employer to call and apologize before asking me to return to work. He hadn't called by mid-afternoon, but his wife did. Tim, I'm weary of hearing your father moan about you messing up. You have a degree. Why don't you go work for somebody else? What if you two can't agree? Mom, I'm thinking about it, but, you know, I'll have to relocate elsewhere. That is the only flaw with it. Why can't you simply do what he wants? Because he does things the old way. We should modernize. Did you explain to him? Over and over, but he's too stubborn to listen. Well, I don't want you to leave, so speak with him again. Okay. I promise he will come to his senses and call me tomorrow. I'm certain I'm looking directly at him. Just get back to work tomorrow. He nods, indicating that everything is well now. Why don't you and Lori come over tomorrow for dinner? I'd love to, Mom, but she won't be present. But why not? I'd been putting it off, but I decided it was time to tell her, and she began telling her father until he told her to talk on loudspeaker. When I was finished, he answered the phone. Here's what we plan to do. I'm firing you so you will not have a job when the case goes to court. You will have no income and will not be required to pay her alimony. You'll get your job after the divorce. I warned you she was worthless, and she proved it. My mother said, You'll be better off without her. Thank you both, but I will take care of things. I will see you at the workplace. Dad, Mom, I will see you tomorrow for dinner. The entire next day. I tried to explain why and how I thought the changes would benefit the company, but my father was more interested in talking about Lori and telling me I told you so. We had supper with my mom after work, and I had to rehash the Lori story and listen to them say, I told you so, while my mom added her own. Lori was already standing on the porch when I arrived home. It was the first time I'd seen her since our hampered journey. I could see her in the light of the porch light. I pulled into the garage and then entered the house. I went to the switch near the front entrance, shut off the porch light, and then went to take a shower. The doorbell chimed. She had left by the time I finished. Finding a lawyer was simple. Finding one who wanted to handle a divorce in which Roger Justin was directly or indirectly involved was a little more difficult. But I found one. Of course, I'll take the case. His father sold me the largest lemon I'd ever eaten, and he never made it up to me. And so it started. Paperwork, meetings, and conversations with Lori and her attorney. In all that time, I never spoke to her personally. Aside from a visit to the house the night I ignored her, she had no interest in communicating. I didn't want to talk at all. She had been cheating. So, according to Jeff, the conversation was pointless. Lori transferred to another dealership, and Roger began to appear less frequently there. There were rumors that Roger had abandoned her for someone more deserving. Meanwhile, Jeff and Jenny got along well, and Jenny's kid thought he was fantastic. He spent his leisure time at her place and mine and was happier than I had ever seen him. The more he talked about his relationship with Jenny, the more I realized that the only personal contact I'd had in the previous 2 weeks was with my hand. I periodically walked home from work, stopping at the lawyer's office, the grocery shop, or my parents' house. Dad got his fill of "I told you so," and even made a few attempts to comprehend my ideas for growing the company. My mother continued finding me girls, and I refused to meet them. Our town is small, and I had no idea there were as many unmarried and eligible girls as she was finding. I believe she is conducting a casting call. A handsome, educated 28-year-old man is going through a divorce, looking for the proper female that is honest, loyal, and trustworthy. Her personality comes first, followed by her looks. Must enjoy music, theater, fine wine, and nice food. I stopped returning her calls after the 5th date. She hooked me up and informed my father that the first time he discussed putting me up, I had already moved to Houston. I finally spoke to Lori on the day our divorce was finalized. The judge slammed the gavel, signaling the end of the marriage, and I moved over to her. Was it worth it? I turned to walk away before she could respond. Jeff used to clean my car, but stopped because he was too busy cleaning Jenny's automobile. So one Saturday I was washing it. He drove into the driveway with Jenny and her daughter Sophie. Sophie was perhaps 7 or 8 years old. They were going to the mall and asked if I wanted to accompany them. I dipped the sponge in the pail of water, cleaned my hands, and said, "Let's go." When I'm bored, I go to the mall and wander around. So, there's stuff to do. I'm at the bottom of the barrel. But that is just what I did. We stayed for nearly an hour, and I was beginning to regret my decision to come. Sophie requested if she may have some ice cream as we passed an ice cream shop. "Not just now, honey." Jenny felt it was too near to dinner time. "Well, what the hell," I said. "Sophie, come on, I'd like to do it as well." She grabbed my hand and took off running. "I shall see you later," I exclaimed over my shoulder. We walked hand in hand, licking ice cream cones. "We must hold hands," Sophie stated. "My mother informed me that she did not want to get lost. When we walk in large groups, so I've had to grasp her hand. I do not want you to get lost, so I'll have to grasp your hand too. That's a good suggestion." We'd been walking for a few minutes, and she was conversing while not licking her ice cream cone. Suddenly, I was thrown to the ground and passed out, banging my skull on the floor. When I woke up, I was handcuffed and surrounded by police officers and an angry mob. I had a glance at Sophie. A woman held her in my arms while she cried. "So what the hell?" "Simply shut up, Slithering. We'll be with you shortly." "It's okay, Sophie," I heard the woman remark. "He can't hurt you now." "He didn't harm me. He bought me some ice cream." "I know, baby, bad men do this on occasion. Aunt Louise, he is not a horrible man. Where's my mother?" I phoned her. "She's on the way. Tim, are you hurt?" "Who's Tim?" "He," she said, pointing at me every time I attempted to speak. "The police officer told me to stop talking. Do you happen to know him?" "Yes. He is Jeffrey's cousin. We're here to shop." "Oh my goodness," Aunt Louise said, then turned to one of the cops. "I guess I made a mistake. Lady, don't tell me that." He scanned the throng. "We'd better get him out of here before the throng rips him apart." He took my hand. "Let us go." Some of the mob followed us inside the security office. I heard things like, "Castrate the bastard and let us take him away." I was starting to grow terrified. and every time I started to say something, one police officer or another would order me to stop and that I could talk later. They led me into a room, searched me, emptied my pockets, and then shackled me. Finally, 2 police officers arrived, uncuffed me, returned my wallet, watch, and other belongings, and began apologizing. Jenny and Jeff also came in. "My God, Tim, I'm sorry. Jenny mentioned that my sister saw you with Sophie. I didn't know who you were and assumed you were kidnapping her." I rubbed my wrists. I'd seen individuals in handcuffs on TV rubbing their wrists when they were removed. I didn't understand why before, but now I do. The damn things hurt. I was angry, shocked, still afraid and nervous. Jess kept asking if I was fine. Jenny kept apologizing, and Sophie clung to her as tightly as she could. I observed one of the officers. "Can I go now?" "Yes, sir. However, before you depart, please sign a release form. You basically threw me on the ground, knocked me out, shackled me, and called me names. I won't sign any release forms until I speak with my lawyer." I moved out of the room and into a wider area. One of the mall's security officials was standing at the door. "Is this the exit?" "Yes, sir. But if I were you, I would avoid going there." "But why not?" "Because there are some who believe you are a child molester and are waiting for you. Jesus is Christ. Can this day get any worse? Can't you tell the truth?" "We attempted. We'll lead you out the back door, Mr. Jeffries," said the police sergeant. He or someone else had certainly glanced through my wallet and recognized my name. "Take him to my car," Jeff instructed. The sergeant noticed me. "Why not let us drive you home? We'll use my automobile. It is not marked. Let us go." I was not angry or unhappy with Jeff, Jenny, or even Aunt Louise. I really needed to get out of there, so I felt that a police escort was the quickest and safest option. When Aunt Louise stopped me, we were already at the rear door. "I sincerely apologize. I seen you with Sophie and assumed you were kidnapping her." I took a long breath in. I understand. But I've been attacked, knocked unconscious, and there are a lot of people out there. I pointed to the main office entrance. "Do you want to cut off my balls? I don't think you should be speaking to me right now." Then turned toward the sergeant. "Please take me home," after I provided him my address. We didn't talk about anything until we got into my driveway. My phone rang at least 6 times, but I ignored it. I did not want to speak to anyone at home. I began to get out of his car, but he stopped me. "Mr. Jeffries, I'm sorry you're in this situation, but I'd rather it occurred this way than have a young child kidnapped because someone witnessed something but didn't report it. I prefer nice Samaritans like Louise Garner. I understand and support your perspective. However, because it was an error, my name and photo will most certainly be broadcast across the county tonight on the news. It should not have been reported at all, but it is sensationalized, so it will be in the news. People are unable to help themselves. Then the news will claim it was an error and everything is fine. However, half of those who see it will not believe that portion of the story, and I will be ostracized for the rest of my life. Thank you for the trip back home. Perhaps it is not so horrible. I'll see what I can accomplish." Yes, and pigs can fly, I was thinking to myself. I got in my car and drove directly to my folks' place. We spent the evening watching the local news. Sure enough, they were there. They were already on when we switched on the TV and found the appropriate channel. We missed the first portion of the narrative, but what we heard was that when you see something, say something. Even if you make a mistake by not saying anything, you risk condemning an innocent child to an unimaginable fate. The fact that they did not say my name or reveal my image was a relief to me. The commentator even concluded the story by stating that we elected not to name the gentleman for fear of his life being flipped upside down even further than it was this afternoon. On a personal note, I apologize. "Hello, this is Louise Garner. Good night. You avoided a bullet. My father stated that it wasn't as horrible as you anticipated. You didn't. What are you going to do now?" I asked my mother. "I suppose I'll just let it go. If I attempted to suit for false arrest, the outcome would be publicized, and my name and photo would most likely make the rounds. I don't want this to happen. And the police did what they believed was right at the time. On the way home, I remembered to bring my phone. By that time, there were 8 messages. 3 were from Jeff, who apologized for what had happened and told me how upset Jenny was. According to the caller ID, the others were from the city police and a local television station. I ignored all of them. Later, I remembered the woman in the TV news department who had finished the program. "Hello, this is Louise Garner. Good night." Shit. What did the police sergeant tell me? I prefer nice Samaritans like Louise Garner. Well, kiss my ass. I didn't get a good look at her in the mall, so I didn't identify her on TV. Her cosmetics must have given her a distinct appearance. I contacted Jeff since I knew he'd be concerned about me. Are you all right? He inquired. I'm fine, but I'm still a bit rattled up. So how is Sophie doing? She is a good one. She became alarmed as the police jumped on you and spilled the ice cream. She improved once we got her some more. She realized you were fine. I'm relieved she's okay. Have you seen the latest news? Almost all of it. The first section was missed. Damn, that was the finest bit. Why? Louise began discussing what had transpired and how she had triggered the entire situation. She stated that she became concerned when she saw her niece strolling with a strange man. She followed you while she was speaking with the police. She didn't trust mall security, so she waited behind you and kept the police informed of your location until they arrived. She accepted full responsibility for what happened and stated that she would most likely do it again in the same circumstances. I assume she was concerned that you might be able to flee with Sophie before the cops arrived. So she followed you. She was seeking for anything to hit you with. She is very sorry. Why didn't you inform me earlier that Jenny's sister was on TV? I didn't consider it important. No, I guess not. Jenny was delivering dinner to my house the other night, and I got the idea that she needed the money. But if her sister is a TV host, she can't be all horrible. Louise makes little money because it's a local product. I'm not sure how much, but I know it isn't much. Jenny is like the majority of us. I believe she is doing well, but she does not have anything additional. If she wants something additional, she will have to find the money. She is saving up for a vacation. So she has a second job delivering food. Good on her. Yes, he made a pause. Tim, I really like her. She likes me. She doesn't mind if I'm slow. I gave a smile. Jeff, no one cares that you are slow. It makes no difference to your buddies. We don't care what other people think. Over the following few days, things returned to normal and there was no mention of the mall incident. I didn't see Jenny or Sophie, but Jeff and I talked every few days, as normal. Another Saturday mid-morning. I was enjoying a late brunch of biscuits and gravy when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Louise Garner. Good morning. Are you occupied? She inquired. Not exactly. I just applied some ointment to my wrists to relieve the pain from the handcuffs. I'll call you Tim. I apologize. It's all okay. Now that I'm in handcuffs, all of my hood friends respect me more. Maybe I'd better leave. No, come on in. Just got off the phone with the parole officer. She only looked at me with sadness. I can only apologize so much. I am sorry for bothering you. She turned to go. I said, wait a minute. I had no reason to be a jerk. She made a pause. I'm still adjusting. I'll get past it. When you do, please call me. She handed me her business card. At the very least, I owe you lunch. I don't know about lunch, but did you have breakfast? Actually, the answer is no. Do you prefer cookies and gravy? Sausages and gravy? Yes. She smiled as she said, one of my favorites. I opened the door wide and she walked into the kitchen. I handed her a plate and pointed to the stove, which contained biscuits and gravy. Would you like me to heat up the gravy? I inquired. If it's okay with you, I can do that. She spoke. Please help yourself. Coffee? Okay, please. Do you want anything in it? This might sound strange, but do you have any chocolate milk instead of coffee? No, is it in it? Yes. She spoke timidly. I know it sounds strange, but she was only the second person in my life who added chocolate milk to coffee. The other was me, and I had only recently begun substituting Bailey's. Did Jeff set you up for this? What? Cocoa milk. Is there something in your coffee? No. Why? I'm the only one I know who does it, or more accurately, has done this. Only now it's up to you. Are you sure Jeff didn't set you up for this? I've been adding chocolate milk to my coffee since I first started drinking it. My entire family agrees. I don't drink chocolate milk even if Jenny allows it, but I have Bailey's. The rest of the morning passed quickly and comfortably, and Louise began to transform the coffee into Bailey's. It was the first time she and I had breakfast together, but it would not be the last. We started dating, and I became her biggest TV fan. Our first kiss took place on our third date. We had our first sex 3 weeks later, and it was my first sex since Lori, during my failed quest for new knowledge, where all I discovered was that she cheated on me. Shortly after Jeff and Jenny married, he decided he wanted more from life and began working on cars full-time. Within 6 months, he had his own garage and too much business to handle. Jenny and Sophie were clearly to his liking. I'm sure there's a scientific or psychological explanation for this, but Jeff seemed to understand what. Smarter, faster, more alert. I can't say exactly what, but he became different and much more confident. Louise and I helped him when he moved in with Jenny. Sophie shadowed him and walked everywhere he went. I saw them holding hands and told her she wasn't letting him get lost. No, we don't let each other get lost. I couldn't think of anything nicer she could say about him. A year after the divorce, I learned that Lori was getting married again, but not to Roger, Justin. She was marrying some poor guy who worked for the city sanitation department. They'd known each other 5 months. I mentally wished him luck. I figured he'd need it. I realized long ago that I had no hatred or even dislike for her. It was both our fault for getting married so early. Of course, the affair was entirely her fault. Life was good for almost 2 years. Jeff and Jenny were planning their wedding. Louise was the maid of honor, and I was the best man. Their parents divorced when Louise, the youngest of the siblings, was 4 years old. Their brother was to walk Jenny down the aisle. The lease on my house expired, and I moved in with Louise. Marriage was never discussed, and we were both perfectly happy that even in the midst of Jeff and Jenny's wedding plans, there was no talk of our wedding. There is a publication that lists job openings at radio and TV stations across the country. Unbeknownst to Louise, the guy who was preparing her news program had collected some of her old videos and sent them out to much larger markets than our little neighborhood. He liked her work and wanted to help her promote herself. One day, she got a call from a TV station in Houston. The news director watched some videos and asked for more. Eventually, he asked her to come to Houston for a conversation. She was thrilled, and we talked about it. It was a dream come true for her, and we decided she should go. After the interview, she told me that one of the videos he saw that made him want her was the one where she thought I was kidnapping Sophie. The conversation went well. They gave her an audition on camera and said they would call her. They came 2 weeks later. They offered her a job. The hiring decision was a foregone conclusion as far as I was concerned. It was a huge step towards a possible national gig, which is, of course, what every broadcaster aspires to. My hard-headed father was finally persuaded to do a couple of things my way, and the change worked. Our business grew slowly but surely, and I was happy to help him. He was happy. I was happy. Our employees were more than happy, and profits were very high. Moving to Houston was not a viable option for me. Houston was 4 hours away, but Louise and I had come to the conclusion that we could endure the distance and keep our relationship alive. And we did for 6 months. Then the trips to each other's houses and phone calls became less and less frequent. We couldn't watch it on TV because our provider didn't provide that option. I could watch it online and often did. She worked there for only 3 months and was moved from the newsroom to a daily talk show where she and her co-host talked to guests and the studio audience about everything. They also attended almost every charity event in the broadcast area. Their pictures appeared periodically in the newspaper and on the website, and she seemed to be having the time of her life. Oddly enough, so did I. The challenge of a growing business suited me perfectly, and I was spending less and less time doing what Louise was doing. Of course, the downside was that she had to sleep alone. At least for me, I didn't realize she was sleeping with her handsome roommate or anyone else. But since Lori was my only reference point, the thought never left my mind. One Wednesday morning, I drove to Houston to surprise her. I told my dad I was taking the rest of the week off and going to see her. "Does it have to be this week?" he inquired. "It's been quite a while, and I think she and I need to talk. I'd prefer you wait. I can't." Right after we talked, Jeff called and said he needed help in the afternoon and asked when I could come over. "I'm going to Houston. I'll be back on Sunday. It'll be too late." "What's so important that it can't wait?" I inquired. "It's something for Jenny." "Jeff, I'm sorry, but I can't. I'm leaving for Houston. Their show aired live every morning after lunch. They would research their guests and develop a plan for the next day's show. They didn't just come in, do an hour-long show, and go home. They spent all day researching and developing the program. I got to her apartment just after noon. I decided to wait for her there, but found that my key no longer worked. I rang the bell, but there was no answer. I went to the manager's office and asked for a new key. She me and greeted me warmly. But when I told her what I wanted, "I'm sorry, but I can't do that." "But why not?" We have a new policy that only the tenant can authorize the issuance of keys or admission to the premises, and they must physically sign for the keys. But you know me. Yes, sir. I want to. But rules are rules. Let me ask you a question. Good. And if I were her husband, would it matter? It depends on who signed the lease. Only the tenant can authorize it. Period. I immediately realized there was a brick wall in front of us. So I walked out of her office and headed to my car through the parking garage. Her reserved spot was empty. I called her from the car without answering. I left a message for her to call me. It is just a few minutes later. "Hi, honey," she said when I answered. "Hey, how are you? Same old, same old. How's it going? I was thinking of coming this weekend. That would be great. I have to finish the project we're working on by Friday." "Okay, what project?" "This is one of the charitable organizations our boss is involved in. We're developing a contest with lots of prizes for the biggest donors. It's fun, but a lot of work. Are you working on him today?" "No, I needed some rest, so I took the day off." "And what are you doing?" "Just relaxing." "Good for you. Get some rest and I'll see you Friday." "Okay, sweetheart. Take care of yourself. Love you. Bye." I tried to say I love you, but I failed. I walked back through the garage, past her still empty parking space to the elevator, got off at her floor, rang the bell several times, and waited each time before giving up and leaving for a very brief moment. I was torn between leaving and continuing to watch and wait for her. I even thought about calling her again and telling her where I was, but decided against it. She had made her bed and was probably already lying in it. The problem was that it wasn't her bed, if that's what she was doing. I left. I was in no hurry to go home. There were 2 cars on one side of the driveway and 2 parked on the street on the other. One was my parents' car, and the other was Jeff's. I wasn't in the mood for company, and since they thought I'd be gone for the rest of the week, I wondered why they were even here. I pulled up to the house and used the remote to open the garage door. Louise's car was parked in the garage. I got out of the car and the door to the kitchen was opened by Jeff bowing the waist. He invited me in and then led me into the living room where my parents, Jenny, Sophie, Jenny, and Louise's mother and brother and Louise were standing. Louise stood in front of the fireplace, surrounded by the others. Jeff nudged me toward her. Everyone was smiling except Louise. She just looked nervous. I walked over to her and she dropped to one knee, swearing to God. "Tim, I love you. If you're going to kidnap someone, I want it to be me so we can live happily ever after. Will you marry me?" she asked, holding out a small box to me. The events of the day faded away as I opened the box and found a gold ring with a diamond in the setting, staring back at me. She was still on one knee when I pulled the ring out of the box and took a closer look at it. I started to put it on her finger, but she stopped me. "No, silly, that's a wedding ring. You can't wear it until the wedding. That is, if there's a wedding, because you never answered me." I looked around at the faces in the room, then looked at her. Sure, why not? Everyone nodded approvingly. Romantic? Not at all. But I said it with a wide smile, hugging her. "You're such a jerk," she said after we kissed, "choosing today in particular to come visit me. You almost ruined the whole thing." Dad patted me on the back. "We didn't know what to do. You insisted on going to Houston, and Louise was on her way here. Even Jeff tried to stop you. We talked to her, and she told us you'd probably be back tonight. So we went on. What was so important that you insisted on traveling today specifically?" I looked at the people around me. Honestly? Yes, everyone but Sophia and Louise said in one voice. Louise spoke up. "Let me try to explain this." She took a deep breath and took both of my hands in hers. "For the past couple of months, we've both felt like we were getting further and further apart. 2 separate lives and living a few hours away from each other. We were both happy in our jobs and lives, but felt like something was missing. I looked back on my time in Houston and remembered the parties, the fun, the people, everything I wanted out of life. My job is perfect, but my life is incomplete. It's incomplete because I can't share these beautiful moments with you." There were tears in her eyes as she continued. "I knew that if I have these feelings, you will have them too, if you love me. I wanted to share every aspect of your life with me about what's good about your business and how happy you are when things are going well." She made a pause. "Am I right?" All I could do was nod my head up and down. "I love you, Tim, with every fiber of my being, and I love you." I told her I meant it. At that moment, the party started. Sophie, Jeff, and Jenny were the last to leave. Sophie wanted to hug me, so I took her in my arms. "Does this mean you're my uncle now?" she asked in a whisper. "Yes," I whispered back. "Good." When they left, Luis and I sat down on the couch, each with our own glass of wine, relaxed back, content in each other's company. "Do you know another reason I to Houston today?" I asked her. "I think so." "Why?" "You were worried that I would live there alone and possibly start a relationship with another man. What about you? What? Get involved with another man?" "Yes. No. The only men I've had a real connection with are my producer, the studio crew, and Thomas. Thomas was her co-host. The thing I was most worried about was Thomas. All those events you went to and your pictures in the papers. I was worried and jealous." She leaned over and kissed me. "Silly girl. I can tell you that Thomas is gay and you have nothing to worry about, but that would be a lie. The truth is, he's the most narcissistic bastard I've ever seen. He expects people, especially women, to bow down to him. We worked well together, but I personally don't care about him, and he doesn't care about me." She sipped her wine. "I wouldn't lie about him being gay, but I lied to you." I gave a chuckle. "Yes, it is my property manager helped. I was just on my way here when your father called and said you were on your way. I called the manager and told her what was going on. She said she would take care of it. She called me a few minutes later and told me that the repairmen were on their way to change the lock on my door. She decided that if you could get into the apartment, you would stay and wait for me, no matter how long it took, which neither of us wanted to do. I felt like I knew you well enough to know how you would react if you thought I was doing something wrong, so I chose that direction. I knew that if I gave you a reason, you wouldn't bother to ask for details. Your experience with Lori would make you think the worst and act accordingly. I'm sorry I misled you, but I knew it would lead you back here to where I wanted to propose to you in front of your family. Do you forgive me? It was unmistakable. Of course I do. And I'm sorry for my lame agreement. I was in shock." She laughed. "We all wanted you to be shocked." Well, it was. I leaned over and kissed her. I loved this woman. And then I took another sip of wine. "What time are you leaving?" "Back to Houston. It was a 4-hour drive, and she had a show, so she usually left in the middle of the night. I'd forgotten about her show that day." "Or are you driving back tonight?" I inquired. I didn't want to waste any more time. I wanted to get her into bed soon. "Well," she hesitated. "Let's talk about it. Today's show was taped on Monday. The show is for tomorrow, and Friday were taped yesterday. Friday's show will announce that it will be my last show because I want to go home to be with my future husband." I sat back and looked at her. "That's normal, right? Of course it's good. It's better than just... Okay, it's great. But won't you miss it?" "Yeah, but I miss you more." "And I was hoping to convince my old station to let me develop a show featuring local heroes, talent events, and people. That should be enough to... To what?" "Until the baby comes, and then we'll see." I took a sip of wine. She sat back and looked at me. "Did you hear what I just said?" "Yeah, I just didn't realize Jenny was pregnant." She shook her head. "She isn't, Goose." "I am." I managed not to drop my glass as I set it on the table and grabbed her. "Our life is beautiful." Louise is back at her old radio station and has the same program she had in Houston, just without a co-host. Our daughter Danielle is great. My dad's business and my business are doing well, and Sophie can't wait to be able to walk Danielle and hold her hand so she doesn't get lost. Thank you for spending the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this essay, please like it and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a tale to share regarding your or someone else's circumstance, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.